Welcome, everyone, to the MIT Systems Awareness Lab Research Seminar. I'll hand it over to Peter Senge to get us started.
Well, thank you, Lana. Make sure I can see everybody here. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening for you around the world. Sahala, good evening to you. One of the things that's great fun. We've gotten kind of used to it. I never take it for granted, though, is we have this wonderful community of people all around the world. So to recognize that it's very, very different times for the different people on this call. This is another in a series we've been doing to start to introduce the different fundamental aspects of our work in the System Awareness Lab at MIT. And we have a special guest today. Helle Jensen is an eminent researcher, and I think she would probably say practitioner in this domain of relational competencies. I've gotten to know Helle a bit over the last few years. She's been a reviewer. We have a year-long Master Practitioner Certification program, and Helle's been a reviewer in that. And I have tremendous admiration for her work. So she's just a great person to kind of center a program like this around. Helle, welcome. You'll get to meet Helle and her work in a little more depth in just a few minutes. I'm going to say just a little bit to set the stage, though. So the aim of the System Awareness Lab is to pioneer in new ways of understanding what we're calling a science of systems change. And I pause a little bit on that phrase, and you'll understand more in a minute why, just because I think it's easily misunderstood. Because we don't mean science just in the sense of abstract theory, general analyses, and things like that. We do mean that, but we also mean it in the sense of the knowledge of practitioners, really our first principle in all this work, and very much what we're trying to embody in these seminars is the validity, or the equal validity, I guess I would say, of the science of the practitioner, or the knowledge of the practitioner, and the knowledge of the scientist. In many ways, these are two different bodies of knowledge. When I say the knowledge of the practitioner, it's the knowledge of the hand, it's the knowledge of context, it's the sense of how to operate. What does it mean to be a great teacher or a principal in a school? It's not just abstract conceptual knowledge, it's knowledge of people, knowledge of place, knowledge of the space or history where we are. So this knowledge is often not seen as knowledge in the same sense of something that's published in a journal, or a particular approach or method that has been tried and tested and generalized to some degree. It's very particularized knowledge. So you might say particularized versus generalized, embodied or in us versus conceptual, expressible knowledge. Often people would say tacit or implicit knowledge versus expressed or explicit knowledge. The core premise in what we will seek to embody today in all these is that these two types of knowledge are equally valid and desperately need one another. Practitioners build a lot of know-how, but it stays very isolated. It's why, at any point in time, you can find a small number of schools doing amazing things. You walk into them and go, wow, this is incredible. And about the only thing you'd be real confident of, it's not likely to spread. And very often it depends on a handful of people. When those people are gone, the magic of that environment tends to fade. So without more generalizable knowledge, theory and method, you might say, the particular knowledge of a practitioner tends to be fleeting, and its impact tends to be short-term. But you can make just the same argument on the other side, that without the ability to translate generalizable theory and method into concrete settings, nothing much really changes. We got a lot of ideas. We don't have real change. So the core premise that we'll try to embody in this seminar today is the equal validity of scientific knowledge or theoretical conceptual knowledge and practical know-how. And the best way we know how to do that is to have conversations that bring both into play. So the way the session will be set up, in just a minute, I'll pause and give you just a chance to collect your thoughts a little. And then we'll hear a little bit from Helle about her work. Mette Boell, who's the research director for the lab, will kind of introduce Helle. They've known each other for a very long time, and I know Helle because of knowing her through Mette. Then Helle will say a little bit about her work, and then we'll hear from 3 practitioners we've invited to join us today: Ernesto Duran, Caroline Picard, and Dina Macdonald. They come from very different contexts. They're all been through the year-long master practitioner program, so we've gotten to know them really well. They're gifted practitioners. They'll share a little bit about their work, and particularly they'll share a little bit of a challenge they're facing, a challenge or puzzle of practice. And then Helle and the practitioners will engage in a conversation. Mette will shepherd all that. So that's the basic plan. So hopefully my little opening comments about how to honor equally the knowledge of the practitioner and the knowledge of the academic or the theoretician is resonant for you. It makes a lot of sense for you, and I hope it's meaningful for you as it is for me. So we'll just take a moment or two just to kind of collect ourselves and just think for a moment about, okay, why does that matter to me? Why does it matter to me and in my own work to give equal value to the knowledge of the hand and the knowledge of the head, the knowledge of practice and the knowledge of theory and method? How does that figure into my own priorities? How is it part of my own work? Why does it matter to me? And in light of that, it might be useful to write down a question or two you would have as we move into today's session. Helle's area of expertise is the theme of this gathering is relational competencies. What does it mean to develop competency in the domain of human relationships? And why does that matter? So there might be 1 or 2 questions you know are important for you relative to building a more comprehensive science of systems change around building relational competencies. What would I like to learn today? So, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my great partner and buddy in this effort, along with Lana Cook in creating the System Awareness Lab, Dr. Mette Boell. Mette.
Thank you, Peter. And welcome, everyone. I'm always just really excited to see you all. Many of you, of course, I know well, and some of you I don't, but it's great to see people from so many different places in the world. I'm always just thrilled by that because it feels essential in this whole endeavor, from my perspective at least, if we truly are to create compassionate systems change in the world, it has to be locally grounded in as many different contexts as possible, and you all are a broad representation of how that looks and feels in many places. So lovely to see you here today. And as Peter said, I have a long-standing relationship with Helle, and I've been just delighted to be able to work more closely together over these past 10 years or so. As I was sharing in our little pre-call with the team here, when Peter and Dan Goldman originally asked me what to do with the whole Triple Focus pamphlet that they put out some 10 years ago, they were like, we really don't know what to do with it. Can you please figure it out? Helle was the first person I reached out to. So she's been a partner on this journey for developing the Compassionate Systems Framework and all our systems awareness efforts all along. So Helle, it's a great pleasure for me to invite you in this fashion as well. Helle has a background as a psychologist. I'm not going to read your bio. I'm sure you're all more than capable of studying that yourselves, but I'll share just a little bit of what I've learned watching Helle and also being involved in some of the processes that Helle are leading on the ground, that Helle is leading on the ground. So first off, it's pretty clear from our perspective that the inner stance of systems change and the kind of outer, larger systems stance is profoundly interconnected. And Helle's work, by and large, really focuses on the space where it's interconnected, namely in the relational awareness or the relational competencies, so that when we grow and develop our own kind of emotional literacy, and we come to understand ourselves better, we know how to map our inner landscape and all those things that we're so focused on in the systems awareness work, it doesn't automatically translate into systems change in the world, in our institutions and organizations and society. There is a very distinct process around how to relate and how to engage with other people, particularly if you're working together, if you're in disagreement, if there is a disproportionate way of power or authority in the space, as is the case always in educational settings where teachers are in position of authority in the classrooms and the kids are voluntold to be there. And you can say the same between principals and teachers and so on. That how to navigate that space comes with a very refined and particular process in the work of Helle that we've been extremely inspired by in the Compassionate Systems Framework. And I'll say for my part, also something I had to learn and practice. And I've learned a lot looking over the shoulder of Helle in this regard, because it's great to know all kinds of things about yourself. And it's great to have ideas about how you want to change the world. But truth be told, if you don't know how to interact with people in a way where they feel seen and heard and met, and where we can't be in disagreement in a generative way, chances are not much change is going to happen. And that's really at the heart of Helle's work. Helle is leading a pretty expansive and inspiring effort in Berlin with several whole schools approaches where they have multiple years of training all staff in the schools in these relational competencies. Helle's work is grounded in contemplative practices as a vehicle for getting to understand how we can show up in relationships. And of course, those of you who are very familiar with our work will know that that's totally aligned with how we operate. And one of the things that we're exploring now with that work is how can we bring in more of the systems perspective as well and really strengthen our connectivity so it becomes not just a whole school, but maybe whole educational context approach for systems change in Berlin and hopefully beyond that as well. And in addition, some of you will know that Lucas Herrmann is one of our research affiliates at the lab, and his PhD, which I always say with pride and joy, was the first PhD in the world that was focused on generative social fields. And his PhD was on the work that Helle is doing. So again, even though we use a slightly different terminology sometimes, Helle's work really and we now can say we actually have data that points to this, really cultivates generative social fields over time. And of course, that's why Lucas is working with us at the lab as well, to just make sure that we use our joint pool of understanding and experience to strengthen this work collectively as partners on a journey for really trying to create different conditions for kids to thrive in the world. So Helle, welcome. I hope this was sufficient, even though not a very formal introduction, but it's with great pleasure that I welcome you into this space. And I know that I'm sure I feel like many on this call, we could have you talk at length for many hours because there's such a vast body of knowledge and experience. I watched you often also in spaces where people have no idea who you are. And as soon as you start speaking, I see ears perk up. All educators in the space know this person knows what she's talking about. So I'm always just really excited to see the responses from people in this space as well. And just we'll hand it over to you to share just a little bit of the incredible work that you do.
Well, thank you, Mette, and thank you, Peter. I think part of what you said really calmed me down, and part of it really made me nervous because of the expectations. So I hope in this, I will share with you, I can say that's simple. This is the way I want to do it, share with you how come I have been working with that my whole professional life. Because I started out in Denmark in the 1970s as a clinical psychologist in the schools. And then I saw that the children with, at that time, they called it behavioral, social, emotional problems, that they behaved really different, dependent on which teacher was in the classroom. And this made my interest for looking at the relationship. Then I had the luck to meet another Dane, Jesper Juhl, who was really, really into that as well. And we started to explore how can we define the relationship between child and a professional, and the relationship between child and parent, and between professionals, colleagues, and between leadership and employees, and so on, all kinds of relation we were looking at. And we saw that very often it is like that in schools, that although the values are very clear when you look at them at the paper, which values should tell about what we want to create, what kind of learning environment we want to create at the school, they always have qualities or values like equality, openness, respectfulness, empathy, interest, whatsoever, tolerance, acknowledgement. And these are really great values. And as long as there are no really difficulties, they work. But as soon as the professionals are under pressure, it's difficult. So I wanted to look, how can we help the professionals to stick to their values also when they are under pressure? And this was actually my question from the very beginning. So instead of what I was expected to do, I was expected to give the children diagnosis. I started to try to get the allowance to look at the relationship instead. And when you look at the relationship between a teacher and a child, it is clear that the one who has the responsibility for the quality of the relationship is the person who has the power and the knowledge and the experience, and it is the teacher. So it doesn't help to put you could say, the guilt on the child because it doesn't function. You have to look at, what can I do different? Do I have the key, to change this relationship so that it will be more constructive and more valuable for both of us? So we started to use the expression from the Swedish child psychologist. You have to, when you are in a relationship, you have to clean the window pane on both sides. You cannot only look at the child, what has the child to learn. You have to look at your own side of the window pane first and see what do I bring into the relationship that makes it difficult right now. And it was when we were able to do that in an atmosphere that are, you could say, trustful and acknowledging, without trying to find guilty teachers or bad teachers, but just looking at that their intentions, because I don't think you're a teacher or a pedagogue if you don't have the intention that you want to reach children or parents or whoever you are working with, students. So but if they don't succeed, it very often has to do with that they have, they feel unsafe, or they feel that they have failed because they don't know, they don't have the tools to stay in contact when it's difficult. So this was the way we started. We started to get allowance to work with the adults in the relationship. And this was really helpful. And then we talked about it this way, that a relationship can be symmetrical or it can be asymmetrical. And when you talk about a child and teacher, it's asymmetrical. So the person who has the highest position in the hierarchy also have the responsibility for the quality of the relationship. And it is not a responsibility that it's easy to take or to do something constructive with, but it's possible to learn how to do it. So we started to look at the three, you could say, three participants: teacher, child, and relationship. And we started to help the teachers to get more knowledge about their own way of showing up, and also to get more knowledge about children and developmental psychology, because I think this is also what has happened in my time since the 70s and until now. There is much more knowledge about what really help people to develop. And it is the relationship, you know, from the very beginning, the quality of the relationship for the newborn, for the babies, for the kindergarten children. They are very, very, they really decide what will happen, not only in the social emotional development, but also in the cognitive, the intellectual development. So it's so important how the relationship is. Then there was a time in Denmark where they were saying, well, it is the responsibility of the parent to bring the children up in a way so that when they come into school, they are ready to learn. But for the way I see it, this is not the way to talk about it, because every time a child or a person is in a relationship where one can feel safe and acknowledged, and acknowledgement doesn't mean that everything that I'm doing is right, that you like everything I'm doing, but that we are able to talk about it. If we can be in relationships like that, we also have the possibility to develop. And you cannot, you see, only rely on what is going on in the families. You also have to look at how can we as professionals go into this kind of relationship. So at that time, I think I worked with that, in the 70s, in the 80s, and then we started in the 90s to look at how can we define the relationship. And then we made a definition on what we think relational competence is. And this is the definition that I have been using ever since. And I have used it to make very, very concrete, very specific kind of exercises, kind of dialogues that we can use when we want people to learn or to develop in a way so that you could say that the relationship will stay healthy for both people on both sides of the relationship. Because what I also saw when I was sitting in the back of the classroom looking was that very often when a child caused a teacher difficulties, the child did leave himself, was out of himself in anger or in grief or whatever, and not many moments after that, very often the teacher also left himself, in getting helpless or in getting not knowing what to do. And then you are having two persons who are trying to get into contact, but neither of them are at home. They are not there. So the first thing you have to do is to help the person to come back to himself. And it's never the child who can do that at first. It has to be the adult, the professional, the parent, or whoever. So this was what we started to work at. And the definition of the relational competence, we did define it like that it is the professional's ability to see the individual child or the individual person on its own terms and attune her behavior accordingly without giving up leadership, as well as the ability to be authentic in her contact with the child. And the will to take the full responsibility for the quality of the relationship. And this is quite a lot. But you know, you can look at it quite, you can make it quite simple. For instance, if a teacher comes to me, I can take a very simple example. I think you all know that. I had a teacher once in Berlin in our seminars that we have just finished there. And he was talking about a situation where the child hasn't for I don't know, many times didn't make his homework. And the teacher was irritated, you know, aggressive, angry, whatever. And he was reacting very fast. And in a way, he was bullying the child, and in a way that he didn't like himself afterward. He was saying, I don't want to be that kind of teacher. And then we try to get into this small example. You know, it is something that is happening in maybe 1 minute or half a minute in a classroom, in a lecture where a lot of other things are going on. And then we look into this half minute in a dialogue. And the first thing, the first step is for the teacher to explain to me this specific example. Not anything in general and anything big. I had difficulties talking with children like that and so on. It's always the specific, very concrete example. And then he tells about the homework and the child once more not doing it, and his own reaction. And then we get into details with that, because this, what is here is interesting for me, is how this person is reacting when he's under pressure. Because we are doing a lot unconsciously when we are under pressure. And it's not so difficult to get it on a conscious level so that we can do something about it and we can take responsibility for that. And then he was then talking about the tension in his body, his breathing getting flat, his way of kind of not liking himself, you know, empathy, compassion. Could he show that towards the child or to himself? Not really in that moment. And did he have any contact to his consciousness, to his overview, to his focused attention? Did he have any contact so that he could be creative? Because, you know, when there's no pressure, you might be able to be creative, to be a bit loose and still have the leadership and so on. But when there's a pressure like that, it's very often impossible. And then he's looking at that, and we are together talking about how can you do to make yourself so much space that you can react in a way that is more, you know, suitable for you, or that you like better. And then he says, if I could only have, I think, breathe twice and be aware of that, I might be able to calm myself down. And this is not anything that takes time, because I know that I have to be very much aware of that, because teachers never have time. Leaders never have time. People never have time. So I have to find a sentence or a way to react that is not taking more time, but is so different in its way of building a relationship. Because you can only build it if you can be in a kind of contact with yourself, so that you are able, you could say, to acknowledge yourself, and at the same time acknowledge the one that you are talking to or working with. So I think this is in these very small examples that we are working with things, and that where we have been able to change the social climate in the schools. And, you know, one thing is what we are doing in these dialogues and the way we are doing the teaching in the modules where we are working, or learning environment where we're working with the teachers and the leaderships as well, I will say. Because we need to have the qualities in the relationship that we want the teachers to take into their classroom. They need to be by us all the time. So this is one thing. And as Mette said in the introduction, we are using the meditation, old meditation traditions, ways of working with what we would call the innate competencies. Our ability to stay, the ability to be present has a lot to do with the ability to feel your body. It's always here in the presence, your breathing, to feel your inborn ability to have a heart for yourself and for other people, to feel your inborn or to have contact with your inborn clear consciousness that is always there from the very beginning, and your ability to be creative. These are 5 very simple competencies that we are training in. I used to say, in time of peace, when nothing difficult is going on, we are practicing. And then when the difficult situation come, we can maybe come back because we have trained so much that it is kind of an automatism there. So these are, very shortly said, in 15 minutes, what we are actually doing. And I think I could say a lot more also about how we have been doing and building networks and how we want to expand that with the work together with the compassionate systems awareness next year. But this is part of our work. But I will say what I have told you right now is the core of what we are doing. This is presence in both directions, outside and inside, at the same time. So this was my 15 minutes I can see on my clock on my stove sitting here in my kitchen.
Thank you so much, Helle. I admire your ability to stick to the 15 minutes and such a clear kind of presentation of the core of the work. And I'm sure, at least for those of you who are familiar with our work in education, can see the tremendous amount of overlap and how inspired we've been by your work in this regard, Helle. I think one of the aspects that is really I just want to highlight before we invite in our master practitioners to join in the conversation is this understanding that our competencies are a skill set that we need to practice consistently. And as you say, practice in time of peace is really helpful, because then we might gradually change our habitual reactive systems when we're under pressure. And it seems to me that for some reason, very often people think it's like an either or. Oh, I know how to be around people, or I'm not very good with people, or something like that. And that we don't know that this fluidity with which we can learn and grow and learn from each other, and that sometimes it's a little uncomfortable because we come to understand things about ourselves that are not quite as great as we would like them to be, is a lifelong journey of just cultivation and practice. So I'm really glad that you're highlighting that. And then one additional point that I'm just extremely interested in is the willingness for teachers to explore these moments and what it takes for us to get into the spaces where people have the willingness to explore that the sense of safety in relationship that is kind of a precondition, I think, for people to be willing to explore how to do things differently, even admit to, like the teacher example that you gave us, right? Admit to, I don't actually like myself in this situation. Mm-hmm. My hunch is that it resonates with most people, and most of us don't know what to do in those situations. So I'm wondering if there's just a little additional insight in that. What does that take?
I think that what is really important for me is that I try to live the values that I talk about, and also that I don't always succeed. And this is also not the point. The point is to listen when people tell me that I am reacting otherwise. And the point is to make a safe atmosphere so that it's possible for the people to talk. And I think this was what was amazing in Berlin, for instance, when doing this. This is a 5-6 year program that we are doing. We had luck to have grants for doing that. And I think what was really important was that we started the first module taking staff from 3 different schools that didn't know each other. Some of them did, of course, because they were colleagues, other didn't. And then we made the first module about what we called personal professional development. Not only professional, but also personal, because it's the fact that you are a human being which can make it possible for you to go into relationship with other people. It's not that you know a lot about math or English or whatever. It is the way you show up as a human being. So we have made it, we call it personal professional. I don't know a better Fachpersönliche in German, but I don't know a better English word for that. And then we make it clear that it is necessary to work with oneself when we want to be able to reach children. Because I think if I look at myself or many other people, there are some children that I can reach very easily, and then there are children where it's difficult for me. And I think this is my responsibility to make my repertoire bigger so that I can reach more children. And we are talking about it that way. And then we also talk about that to have access to the qualities that you have. And these innate qualities, they are there. It is not something new that you have to learn. And I think they really, really appreciate that. And in the very beginning, when we started in Germany, they all had pen and paper ready, to read and to write and to do. And they very easily saw that this is not what it's about. And it was for the very first time they have had a seminar where it was about something else and where people did care for them as human beings. And they were saying thank you when leaving and saying, this is the first time anyone ever asked me in my profession, how did you feel? And how was it for you in this situation where the parents were talking like that to you, or where you did lose you came to your wits' end or whatever? How was it for you? So I think you have to work on that. And I think this is also what you are making research on, this generative social field. How can you make an environment where where people can be authentic, be themselves, and at the same time learn? Because it's not about telling what you can. It's more about also, this is okay and good and everything, but it's also about seeing where is there any developmental possibilities, is there places where I can learn something new? And I think we have, in a way, we have to find a way to live it. And when I started in Germany, because Germany is, of course, something else than Scandinavia, they said to me, my German colleagues, you can't do that in Germany. And I said, I'll bet I can, because I'm not talking so much on a cultural level. I'm talking on an existential human being level. And this is something else. And if we can reach each other on that level, it's to me anyway, it seems much, much easier. And I think this is our experience in Berlin as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Helle. And interestingly, in a way, probably that's where our approaches are the most aligned, that they're really about the universal human experience and not at the functioning, operating solely at the cultural level. And who knows, because one more thing that I just want to highlight before I introduce our lovely master practitioners into the spaces, this work seems to stick. So most social emotional learning efforts that we've seen throughout the many, many different places that we work seems to be primarily dependent on individuals doing great work, carrying the torch. And when those individuals leave, the work seems to dissipate. We have a different experience from the places where you worked, Helle. I've looked over the shoulder long enough to know that this is something people stick with. And that appears to be the case also in the places where we work, that this is this becomes a personal choice for people that they want to live their lives this way. It's not about a skill set in my classroom. It's about a human way of being in the world that enhances my sense of well-being, my sense of purpose and connectedness, and so on. So we are, of course, in this incredibly fortunate situation that we have so many lovely people from around the world that we get to work with closely. And most of them are master practitioners. And we invited in 3 of our master practitioners from 3 distinct spaces where a lot of work is growing and going on at the moment. And the reason why we picked the 3 of you is because we know you well enough to know that there is an implicit focus or attention to the quality of relationships, and how you show up and how people respond to you is always the first whenever I engage in conversation with any of you, that's always the center of focus and attention. So let me welcome you, Ernesto Duran from Ventura County Office of Education, heading Region 8 of the System of Support for Expanded Learning in California, and is one of our key partners in the site development work that we're engaged in at the lab, and trying to study how compassionate systems change actually grows, and how we can grow more consistent generative social fields. Ernesto is a master practitioner from cohort 2 and has been a long-term partner since we started working in California. So welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Such a pleasure to tune in with everybody and be here. I apologize in advance. I'm at a Starbucks, and it seems to me like they turned up the music. So as I'm hearing NSYNC bump in the background, I'm trying to make sure. Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that I'm fully present, at least that my ears are capturing everything. So please let me know if it's a little loud in the background. You know, authenticity is something that for some people might be hard to adopt, and in the work that we do, we really work on being authentic. And let me give you just a little context in what we do at the regional office. So we're part of the larger system of support for expanded learning in California. We support 109 school districts that provide about 700 or provide after school programs in just about 700 school sites, and serve about 90,000 students. Our region is fortunate to receive just about $300 million in funding. And the reason why I mentioned the money piece, the funding piece, it's because we get to deal with many different administrators from all walks of life that have their own personality, right? And so on a daily basis, we get phone calls from folks that have different priorities, that have different challenges, and that show up different based on the situations they're dealing with. And so I'm sure a lot of them are amazing people, but sometimes we don't get the best of them because they're in a bind and they're struggling. And sometimes their best self is not what we see. We see that person in crisis, and it's our job to make sure that we're there authentically to support them and provide what Michael Funk likes to call adaptive technical assistance. And so we like to call it compassionate technical assistance. And so one of the main challenges I have internally with my team is, how do I teach my team how to be authentic with people? Because at the end of the day, if we're having our own challenges in getting along together, then imagine what kind of challenges we could have in being our own authentic selves with the folks that we deal with. And so one of the things that I've been working on is really, practicing authenticity, working with each other to really be more, I guess, aware of how we show up in our own space, how we hold our own container, because every day we're tasked with different challenges, and I do mean every day. We just got a phone call not long ago from a gentleman that has about $2 million to spend in the next few weeks, and said, I want to buy 4 Tahoes. And so, that's about $500,000 in funding that they like to spend. And so how do we provide technical assistance without getting ourselves involved in this, whether we believe that Tahoes are necessary for after school programs or not? We have to be kind of neutral in how we provide that support. But one of the challenges we had is that our team got really they had different opinions and priorities, and there was a little disagreement internally that caused us to kind of have to take a step back and have a conversation about the way we talk to each other when we don't agree with the support we're providing. And so I like to think that sometimes I'm a good diplomat in understanding people's take on things, but I'm also aware that I'm not a great manager. I can do a lot of things, but staff management is one of the areas that I'm still working on. And so in my attempt to be diplomatic in diffusing a situation, I also forgot that we have tools to address these things. Simple tools like meditation. Why don't we just do a quick grounding and come back to the issue? And so luckily, one of our master practitioners in training, Andres, had a fantastic idea and said, hey, I know I'm feeling the space to be a little heavy right now. Why don't we just do a quick grounding and then come back to the challenge? And we did. And guess what? That we were able to solve the situation after we were able to ground ourselves. And it's, I mentioned that because it's kind of hard to do that with our grantees. It's kind of hard to get them to meditate. But if we show up authentically with them and make sure that we don't make their emotions ours. There's something that Roger Burton has talked to me about around neutral present awareness, right? And making sure that the emotions that others are carrying are not emotions that you make yours in situations that are challenging. And the work that we do that is really important is how to be neutrally present, but aware of what's going on and not climbing the ladder, right? So, and then looking at fundamental solutions and not quick fixes, right? And figuring out like also how to look beneath the iceberg to know really how to address challenging situations. And that's at the core, that's something that I'm challenged with right now is how do you teach that to younger staff members, to folks that haven't had the experience or the exposure that I had. One of the first things I learned as a child who was abandoned at age 7 in Mexico City was how to be socially agile and where to find food first. So my emotional intelligence was an area that I really developed as a kid from the time I was 7 to 12 or 13. And then the academics kicked in once I felt that there was some sort of stability in my life. But I mentioned that because we all come from different walks of life, and in the work that we do on a daily basis, we have to be aware of the different personalities. But if we work on really showing up authentically and relate to the challenges that we have, and of course we are so lucky that we have all these tools around our belt. So really figuring out what are some of the things that we can do to maximize the resources we have around us is one of the things that we work on a daily basis.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ernesto.
Notice I try to make reference to all the tools in one sentence, right?
Yes, I did notice. Gold star to you.
That was for Senge right there.
Thank you, Ernesto. And we'll come back. I'll invite Helle to just reflect with the three of you once you've all had an opportunity to share. I'm also mindful that my video is lacking a little bit. So if my mouth is not aligned with the words that are coming out, please don't get too confused. Maybe look somewhere else. Caroline, I'll invite you to join us as well. Caroline is one of our master practitioners from cohort 3. She used to be a assistant superintendent in the Francophone school district in British Columbia, where there's a lot of work going on as well. And soon after we started working together, Caroline was like, yeah, okay, I don't really have time to be a assistant superintendent any longer because I want to just work with compassionate systems change. So Caroline is one of our key partners on the ground and also in collaboration with University of British Columbia at the moment. So welcome, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Mette. Good day, everyone. Glad to be here. Thank you, Helle, for your nice sharing this morning. And Ernesto for putting us into context with all the tools that you've brought up. And I do work with British Columbia. I'm involved right now with 4 school districts, and 3 of those are in their 2nd year. So when Mette talks about sticking, once we start doing the work with the district, they want more. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing and what the opportunity for me of trying to develop is about. Ernesto mentioned many tools that we're using when we grow this work in British Columbia. And what I've noticed after working a couple of years closely with some district is that the tool that brings people's attention and inspiration is the one around the three Legos tool. Those 3 legs, the personal mastery, the reflective conversation, and the system thinking and sensing, we find that to be able to build the system thinking and the relational relationship, the reflective relationship that Helle was talking about, is the importance of the personal mastery. And we're finding right now in the system that there's many wobbly stools because of the complexity of the people working in those classrooms and schools. And how do we stabilize those tools? And I've found in my practice that working with self-relationship brings hope and inspiration for people. This whole notion of self-awareness, self-regulation, self-esteem, efficacy, self-reflection, self-compassion, all those self-elements are really bringing so much hope for people, giving them permission to reflect on who they are, how they feel about themselves, the way they treat themselves. So cultivating that inner life that Helle was talking about, right? And that's that social field. How do we create that social field to understand those feelings and manage those feelings, those thoughts? So we become intentional about the work that we want to do. So I find that focusing on the self-relationship has a huge impact on how people show up in their work. And what I'm also finding is that in many of our districts in British Columbia, we start working with senior leadership, principal and vice principal. And as soon as we work with them for a while, then they want us to bring in more people because they find that the way of showing up is changing the conversation and the relationship in their context. So now I'm working with parents. Tomorrow night, I'm doing a session with parents from all the school in the local area because people want parents to come into the school and use that language and use that way of showing up so they can have those deep conversations. I've been working with trustees. I've been working with students. And the more people we bring into the conversation, ideally is to have all those roles within the same session, so we can share that same knowledge and understanding and language. So really working on self-leadership for me has been key to this work, to be open to now work on other tools and be intentional about using them. And the one more thing I'd like to say about those tools is that, and I've had that conversation with Mette before, is that how many points of touch do we need for people to be able to actually apply those tools? And I'm finding in the practice right now, after 2 years, that they internalize the tools and they can show up in a different way knowing those tools, not having necessarily to apply them. And as they get more comfortable, they might apply them in different contexts, but just being aware of them has a huge impact on how they show up and how the culture can be changing in a school. So I'm going to leave it at that for now, Mette.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Caroline. It's always exciting to hear. I haven't had a chance to check in with you for a while, so I'm just excited to see how things are unfolding. And Dina, in Danish, we have a very weird saying that I never quite understand, but I'm going to use that now. I'm going to translate it to the best of my ability, which basically means that the last person is the raisin at the end of the sausage. So you can now be the raisin at the end of the sausage. So Dina Macdonald from Humboldt County Office of Education, the dear partner and co-conspirator in the work of compassionate systems change in Humboldt County, one of the other site in California that we're focused on with our research at the lab. Dina has been instrumental in growing and developing the work in Humboldt, and works directly with the site development team and with teachers and educators and principals throughout the county. And I've had the great pleasure of visiting schools with Dina and her team. And one of the reasons why I said, yes, I really want to work with Humboldt County is to see the relationships between the schools and the county office and the district people and the county office, which in many places that I've visited is not entirely pretty, because there's a lot of hierarchy and there's a lot of, perceived changes in authority and who holds power and funding and so on. And whenever I've been in any site with Dina, there's always hugs and greetings and people knowing each other really well, and a lot of laughter and just deep pleasure from everybody that we've been visiting. So I don't know if you just take me to the right places, Dina, but I think I've gone to enough places with you to know that this is a pretty consistent pattern. So lovely to have you here, and I'll invite you into the space as well.
Thank you so much. It is great to see all of your shining faces. And boy, yeah, the raisin. Thanks, Mette. There was a moment when we were pre-planning that Mette said, hey, if anyone wants to switch the order, I thought, I'm third. Great. What a lot to take in, and to really, I'm just listening to how Helle laid things out, and then Ernesto and Caroline, thank you for creating just a great on-ramp. A little tiny bit about me. I am up in Northern California. Our district is much smaller than Ernesto's. Our county is much smaller. We have about 130,000 people. We have 18,000 students in the entire county, and then we have around 31 districts, and not including charters. So we're really small. This is my 30th year in education, and there's probably been 7 days that I haven't wanted to show up. And what Mette said about relationship is key. It is everything. It is, if there's no relationship, there's no way forward in my mind. Nora is also on the call. She's my work wife, and just someone who really helps support me. And what Mette talked about, the play and the laughter. If work isn't joyful, what is the point? So one of the things that I was really thinking about is, Helle, when you talked about under pressure, I wrote down like under pressure, right? It is easy when things are going swimmingly, and I'm going to use swimmingly as an analogy. I'm a swimmer by nature. I was actually a lifeguard and a lifeguard instructor. So I've got some mad skills. And when the water's clear and calm, isn't it gorgeous? And a lot of times what happens is you'll be in a situation working with a group of educators, and sometimes I'm working with, I appreciate Caroline, like board members, parents, families, students, admin, classified, custodial staff, you name it. When it's smooth, the water's great, it is easy, right? I'm amazing. And then the water gets really murky. Sometimes you show up, you'll go from one area that's just crystal clear, and you'll go into something very murky. And the reason why I'm using swimming is you are trudging, you are really groping, searching, trying to keep your balance, and you're trying to reach the person that you're with or the group that you're with. One of the things that, I don't always know, there's no manual. So every time you show up, what Helle, you talked about, that ability to listen and suspend judgment. And I just think of, I know we're calling it the wheel of connectedness, but the ladder connectedness, I am really trying to be aware of where I am. I'm just going to tell a quick little story of Nora was with me on this, so she'll appreciate this, I think. We went to a school, and we were going to meet with an instructional coach. And we walk into the office, and a student is giving the secretary just a ration. You can just feel the energy. I'm like, oh, here we go. And then I'm like hyper aware. New secretary to me, I'm trying to catch her eye and smile. Like here's what can I do authentically? That idea of compassion. What can I do authentically in any given moment to alleviate suffering authentically without tipping over to toxic positivity, not jeopardizing myself, not, trashing the relationship that I don't even have yet, but I'm trying to make eye contact with her, and I give her the little smile. We then go into the hallway, and there's administrator, arms crossed, out in front of the girls' bathroom, says, "Okay, ladies, long enough." I'm like, oh. So then I know that person. So I'm trying to, what can I do? And I don't know. So, think of that swimmer, like the water's getting rougher, and we haven't even gotten to the classroom yet that we're going to meet with the person. How can I, in that moment, give a little, and I know a smile may sound, I don't know, Helle, I was just thinking about all the things you were talking about. Like, can I come home to myself? Because I'm feeling the distress. I can feel the tension. So engage a tiny bit with her, go down the hall, and then a teacher that I know well comes out and says, "Wow, man, it is a shit show today." I'm like, oh. That person's in distress. So it's just distress after distress, and then trying to make that connection with that person. I know him from I know him. So I say something that I know is going to connect with him, and he goes on his way. So we get into the classroom, and the teacher is, wow, student, the state testing, this kid wrote something highly inappropriate. There's a suspension, another student for suspension. And all we are to do, we're supposed to be there to talk about all the wonderful learning that she's done when she went on this workshop up in Oregon. And that is not going to happen. So in that moment, and I know this person really well, I'm thinking, and I haven't seen her in a while, like connect. So we sort of like settle down, the water's not so murky. I go back to something, what I know about her. What is it that she values? And Helle, you talked about your values. Like, how can I live those values? So I think, like, what is she? I know this is something she's working on. So I kind of start there, and it's sort of like a little stroke towards her. I'm not going to get too close because I'm not going to get too close yet. But what can I offer that person in that moment to help them come back to themselves? Helle, when you said, I felt like you were like, yes, these are all the things that I want to do. Coming back to myself. I use the analogy of, it's a medical term, take the you take the paddles, you clear it, and you kind of shock the person. I think coming back to yourself is much nicer. So those are all the things, like, I don't really know if I'm effective in that moment, or if I am alleviating, if I am helping. I like to think I am. And Nora said, and I didn't talk to Nora about this, I hope you don't mind sharing, but afterwards she's like, "Do you think we were helpful?" And I just sort of, my heart is like heavy. Like, am I helpful? So, Ellie, that's one thing that I really always, wonder. Like, I don't want to add to the stress, but I also don't want to. I want to alleviate, and I'm not quite sure about that. That was one thing I was thinking about, and the other thing that I really was trying to figure out is, Meadow. Thank you for inviting me to this call, and what you talked about my relational capacities or my intelligence is like it is innate. Like that is, I have my whole entire life, I have lived for that. When I was a kid, I'm like, when I have to leave my friends at the end of the day after our play date all day long, I would sob. I want them. I'm wired for that. But then the piece of how do you truly authentically grow it for other people? I've had amazing mentors in my life. I've had so much learning that has been so helpful to me. And then I think, how am I really paying it forward authentically? How can I lift others up? I think sometimes I have an unconscious competency. I'm not quite, can I label it? Can I name it without kind of destroying the magic per se? And that's like as I'm working with people, so what that I can do it? Oh, that's great. How can I really increase the capacity of others? I'm going to stop there. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dina. And thank you, all three of you. And Helle, I'll invite you to reflect with people.
Wow, yeah, thank you. Thank you, all the three of you. I just think I will start with the ration in the sausage end, because now it's quite in my very vivid in my mind. I was all the time thinking, Dina, what about you? You are thinking about making things for everyone else, and I was all the time thinking about how it was to be you. And I think when you ask me this question, what to do, I would wish I have had at least 20, 30 minutes with you, making this, this dialogue with you. How was it with you getting into looking at the secretary, talking with a student? What happened to you? And in my imagination, because I don't know, but I always look in pictures, I see you on the moving to the classroom, and I am really interested in that question that I know you cannot answer now because it's not the time, but it is all, for me, it is this self-relationship. How was it to be you? How was it for you in these minutes? And I think for you to give as authentic feedback as possible. This is where you have to look, because it seems like you have your, I don't know what it's called, antennas out in the area. You can really feel and sense what is going on. I would wish that you would take some of them and put them inwards, to change the direction and see how is it for you, because I think this is where you can, I think it doesn't take a lot for you to get into a way that maybe for you also would be more satisfying, because you ask this question, am I helpful? But and to me, this is what interests me, because I think if I can, when I work with relationships, I look at both sides of it. And of course, when I look at you come with your example, I see you as the professional going into the school, providing something. And I think of that, how can you, for yourself, how can you get into contact with what is going on? Standing there, taking in all these different vibes that is in the room and what to do, and to say something that is not judging, but is still an authentic, feedback from you. I think this is, for me, this is the interesting point, and this is exactly what I mean when I talk about this under pressure. I think you got it. You got my, my point totally. Yes. So I cannot answer it better now, but I think this is where you have to look. And also I think for you, and I think for all of us, to have the time, the space where we can talk about what it makes to us when we are in situations like this. How is it, what does it do to us that we have been in this situation? a day, a stressful situation that you mentioned here. And I know most of you will say, well, this is not that stressful. This is everyday life. Yes, of course it is. But if you want to stay fit and balanced, I think we have to pay attention to that. And this way of working with dialogues that we have, you could say, developed, or the way we're doing it, this really takes into account exactly these, you could say, these perspectives, how to take care of myself when having a job where I am really giving out a lot every day. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Helle. And I can almost envision this dialogue, and I just want to, I would like to listen in to just learn as much as possible, because I think it's so spot on, and such a delicate disposition that many of those of us who have a kind of a particular attunement and wanting to be of support and wanting to be helpful and so on, it's easy for us to have a little more attention in our models, what we say in the relational awareness, than anchored in our own somatic awareness. That's a challenging balance to uphold. And I'm glad you're pointing to that, because how do I stay grounded and as aware of what's going on in me as all these things are exploding around me at the same time is I think probably a lifelong question.
Yes, you have to be able to split your awareness and to send it in both directions at the same time. And this is what you can, this is a long life practicing, I guess, to come to that. And I think when the first question you or what I got from you, Ernesto, thank you from that. What I did highlight here, because I think this is where I can answer, is how do you teach that to young people, to be in these situations that are difficult when other people's are in a lot of emotions. This was how I understood it. I hope that was correctly understood. And I was thinking immediately at an example I had this weekend when I was teaching in a German university, a young teacher who was talking about having difficulties teaching two young men who I don't know about what, this is also not the matter, but they were working in a group together, the two men, they were in their 20s, and then they were very close to get into a fight because they were not aligned about what was right and what was wrong. And then this young teacher, he said, well, I'm a man of a certain height and weight, so I feel I have to be present when things like that happened. And then it was difficult for him, and he really was sad that he saw I couldn't solve it in a good way, he said. And he went with one of the young men outside, and he wanted to talk to him and to make him quiet, and it was not so successful. And then he said to the young man, maybe you need a break and a cigarette. I'm fucking not needing any break or any cigarette, the young man said. Of course, because this is a way of defining another person when you yourself need a break. So it took a while for me to talk to him in a way so that he could see he needed a break, because he didn't know what to do. And I said to him, well, what about if you said, I need a break? He said, but I offered him a break. It's not what it's about. It's about you being authentic in your way of not knowing what to do. And you say, I need a break. I don't know what to do. I need a break. Let's talk tomorrow or whenever. And he could see it, and he could see the difference, because no human being wants to be defined from others. So I think this is what we have to learn, but it also takes something for a young teacher to say, I don't know what to do, because this is part of being a teacher. You always need what you need to know what to do. It's kind of written in a not visible way, that you have to know what to do. But this is not how it is. None of us knows always what to do. So I think you have to stick to that and be able to say authentically, I don't know what to do. I have tried what I could. So let's just end here. And this is a kind of what we call when we wrote about it, Jesper Juhl and I, in this book about relational competence from obedience to responsibility, it's called, we wrote about what we call the personal language, the language that fits to who I am right now as this personal, professional human being that I am in this position here doing my job. Personal language. It's not an analytical language. It's not about I'm not trying to explain for the young student, well, right now when you're doing like that, can you understand it's not possible? Or to the child, right now when you are asking for an ice cream, it's really not appropriate because we are eating in half an hour or whatever. This analysis or a way of intellectual way of talking when a person is in any kind of emotion, it is not the way to connect. If you want to connect with other people, especially if it's in a situation of conflict, you need to speak this personal language. And this is what we have unlearned, because if you talk to a child 2 years old, they speak perfectly clear in a personal language. But we are trying to be expert or clever or not losing our faces or whatever. And I think this is what we need. We need to have the courage to be the persons that we are, whatever it is.
Yeah, thank you, Helle. I love that. We need to have the courage to actually be us. I want to make sure that there's such a richness in the chat and a lot of questions and comments and reflections and so on. So just want to make sure that we also open it up to the space. If anybody has a question or a reflection that you'd like to share. And as you can probably tell, this is why I started out saying we could easily have this go on for a couple of more hours, because we're just barely scratching the surface of all the richness of experience that's available to us in this space. But the floor is open. Should anyone like to ask a question or share a reflection or a comment? Yeah, Libby?
You're muted.
We can't hear you, Libby.
Can you hear me now? As it turns out, the microphone needs to be in front of your mouth. Hello, everyone. Nice to see everyone. This has been so wonderful and so rich. And the question I have is, I put it in the chat, which was around authenticity. And I have always thought of and taught, actually, so I'm happy to be corrected, authenticity is kind of like a process. And I usually say, like, for those of us who can currently walk, right, at one point, walking was not authentic to us. And so we had to learn, we toddled into walking. And that's like a physical example and somewhat able body focus. But the idea is that you can get there, right? Or that you can get there and then, maybe later in life, you're not walking anymore, right? And so that is another way of being authentic. Versus, or I guess I'm saying versus, but maybe it's not versus, this idea of that there's some deep authenticity within us, this gem that we need to excavate out and then show to the world. And I guess I see those as kind of different ways of defining the term, and I'm curious about how you define it and how you think about authenticity. Thank you.
Yeah. I think, see if I can put it clearly. I think authenticity, it is not, as you say, I realize that you also don't mean that it is kind of a spot that you can seek so long that you can find it. This is not how it is. It is much more in the moment. What is in this moment authentic? Where am I mostly aligned with myself, my personal values and my way of being right now my unsecureness maybe, or my happiness or whatever, or my, how can I express that as clearly as possible? And at the same time, as we're talking about authenticity in a professional context, it's also where I can, you could say, reach or stay in contact with my values, and that they are aligned with the way I express myself. Is that, I don't know if it's clear, you know, my values, for instance, is openness and, you know, respect, empathy in a relationship. And am I expressing that right now? Or am I not? You know, for me, this is the way of authenticity, that I can, maybe I could say in some situation, no, I'm not angry at all. And I was angry as hell, you know. So this is to me not authentic. It could be, it is to stay to what you feel and be able to express it, also without making the other person's wrong, you know. To me, this is, yeah, I think I can right now explain it better.
That's great, Helle, except that when you say, no, I'm not angry at all, it comes like this. No, I'm not angry at all. You have to really...
yeah, to be...
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Libby. And a very interesting, of course, exploration. Part of how we've worked with the term, we've talked about compassionate integrity, that there is alignment between how we think about things, how we feel about things, and how we express ourselves. And that is a way of kind of cultivating or leaning into more authentic expressions, but probably a lifelong journey for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think whenever we have a dialogue, the ones that I were mentioned beforehand, it goes about to try to find the authentic expression for the moment.
Yeah.
You know, the example I gave before with the young man, the young teacher, we have been talking about how it was for him when he needed to show up because he has a, you know, a physic that could calm things down. But he said, I also am a bit reluctant. I don't like it. So we were talking about this dilemma that at the same time there are feelings in you that goes in both directions. And if you want to say authentically what you mean, it's not enough to say, I think I have this is my duty to show up because I have to. You can understand that. Yes, I know this is part of it, but I also need to know about the part of you who don't like it, and of course don't have the lust or the need to go into this fight. You know, so it is about finding the whole. Try to find a more elaborated picture, and to say, yes, this is also me.
Yeah, and not just the polished version, the Instagram version.
Exactly. Yeah, not just, yeah, that's a good expression.
Yeah, thanks, Helle. And one more question we might have time for. So Mariana.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I have a question that is something constantly pondering in me, and is my constant search for showing up differently. So I am generating spaces. So I am, you know, showing up in a positive way, but also what is the fine line when I am showing up differently and being myself? So how much of myself do I have to give to show up differently to generate space?
I don't know if I can say a percentage or how much or something like that, but I think what is important is to know it for yourself. It's not whatever comes to a conscious level to me. I'm not speaking it out in all relationships, but I think I need to know for myself that I'm standing in this condition here right now, or I don't know if I need it, but I think it's nice if I know it because that makes it more. You know, I usually say to the students that we are responsible, but we can also create the level of challenges that we want to have. You know, if I'm sitting with a group, I can do it in a way so that I'm getting a lot of challenges, because I can do it in a way so that I step by step all the time talk about what is going on, and then I am more, you know, sure to challenge the people to a level where they can cope with it, or what can I say, or where I can cope with it maybe. So I think to me it's not only about what do I have to show. I also think this is a question of your, what do you say, temper, or what is important for you. But I think it's important that you can, what is coming out of your mouth, is aligned with what is behind, you could say. Because I very often say to people that if it is not, it will come out of the ribs, you know, between the ribs. It will kind of, you know, do something to the atmosphere that is difficult, because this is also what was a question beforehand, I guess, from Ernesto, this, what is don't make their emotions to yours. You know, there can be a lot of homeless feelings in an area if you don't take into consideration what you are putting out yourself. So to me, it's not about you have to express all of it, but you have to be aware of as much as possible. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think this is what I forget to say, because I'm always so keen on, and I have been looking at your, when you have your meetings, you are so good at acknowledging, and I'm not at all. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Helle, and apology accepted on behalf of everyone, I'm sure. I don't think that was much needed, though. Unfortunately, we're actually 1 minute after our closing time, and all I can say is to be continued, because clearly this is a much richer and deeper conversation. So Helle, if you will allow me to pre-promise before we even made arrangements that we will find a way for people to be able to engage in more depth with you in a future session. I hope that's okay. Mm-hmm. And just lovely to have you share all your experience and wisdom in the space with us today. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody who joined us. I know a couple of people have written in the chat, oh, I have to run for another meeting. I'm so sorry, I want to learn everything, and so on. And there's a lot of great questions in the chat as well. So hopefully we'll get around to actually addressing that in a future session before too long. And time for folks to unmute and say goodbye. And we can hopefully leave this meeting with more wisdom than when we came into it. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Lucas.
Bye, Allison. Much love.
Oh.
Oh, and Lucas, I have my Germany jersey just for you.
Oh, yeah.